Welcome back, everybody, to us doing something interesting. Two toxic masculine people talking about toxic masculinity in literature or something like it. I'm here with my good buddy, John, to talk about Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser in detail. Hey, John, how are you doing today?
Good, man.
That's very good.
I assume we're going to uphold our usual standards of rigorous academic conduct.
We are doing exactly that. And I guess it's time to open a beer.
Yeah.
Well,
cheers.
Cheers. Well, now that that's settled, let's talk about what we're actually going to do today. And that is to start looking at the stories of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. To be precise, the Swords series of collections of stories. And we're talking about the first one today, that is Swords and Deviltry from 1970, collecting 3 stories, basically. And we'll come back with the next one, which is Swords Against Death. And yeah, it was sort of an idea from you, John, to say, go back and talk about Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser some more, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I just had the idea because it seems like everybody's just worried about what the newest book is, and a lot of people missed out on reading the classics. And definitely Fritz Leiber's work is a classic, and it deserves to be read more, and it's also a lot of fun, and it's awesome. So
yeah, that's certainly true, and I think it's especially good to have like a conversation about it with 2 people like you and me, 2 friends who've known each other for a long time, because at the core and center of a lot of the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stuff is very much a male friendship or bromance or all kinds of other aspects of that you know, feel kind of fitting for us to talk about.
What do you mean? Do you think it could have been ill met in Castle train station instead of ill met in Lankhmar?
It could very much be exactly that. I'm not sure how many rats there are in Castle train station. I'd rather not know, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's a good idea for us to talk about that, because a lot of the themes and topics that Fritz Leiber touches upon with that male friendship is something that we certainly have experienced, I guess, if with, you know, less swords, but certainly with at least as much drinking. So those stories speak to me in a way that few others do, and I assume it's similar with you.
Yeah, I mean, I read some of them years ago when I was a kid. It's a little foggy, but going back and reading these again as well, technically an adult, I still don't act like it, but it's stunning how insightful Leiber is into male relationships and the rampant alcohol abuse that goes hand in hand with that. It's fantastic, actually. And he does a very good job of showing the buddy relationship from the outside and just how ridiculous it gets, and how funny it is, and how sort of endearing it is, and its weird insecure vulnerability.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so good compared to a lot of other stories that have, you know, buddies relationships in it. That Leiber does not, you know, paint over all the ridiculous aspects of it. He doesn't shy away from showing the awkward stuff and the weird stuff that so often happens, and that, you know, your cool buddy cop movies and whatever often kind of paper over, and he doesn't do that at all.
No, I mean, you get the good with the bad here between Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, right? So.
Yeah.
Which makes it a lot more.
So yeah, I think like what we should start with is like to look at the idea of these Swords series of novels, or like collections of short stories, novellas, novelettes, and whatever, because Leiber does something that works here because he's doing it, and did not work, for example, for a lot of the Conan collections that were released around the same time. He sorts the stories into a biographical order, and famously Conan doesn't, and Robert E. Howard never had like a Conan biography. He famously said that he wrote them down as they occurred to him, as if Conan would tell him stories at a campfire. And Fritz Leiber obviously wrote these stories in in a very different order than they were published in these collections, the Swords Against whatever. But for that, he kind of took them and ordered them in like a chronological way, and added like short introductions and interludes and stuff between them to give like an ongoing saga of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, which is why we get the two prequel stories in this one, the Snow Women and the Unholy Grail, and then Ilmet and Lankhmar, which is the one story when they meet for the first time, in a way.
Yes.
I think that's an interesting aspect because it's sort of retrofitted into that biography in a way.
Yeah, so the Conan stuff you would be referring to would be the Elsprog de Camp stuff, where the
exactly
that stories are pastiche and some of them aren't, and
yeah, exactly those Conan the whatever, Conan the Invincible. No, the Invincible. Conan the Invincible is one written by Robert Jordan, but yeah, that ongoing Conan the Pirate, Conan the Barbarian series. Yes, it's Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, I think.
Lynn Carter,
yeah, that one, yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's always been like attempts to have like with like serialized characters to have like an in-game world or in-world biography or chronology where it's like this adventure happened before this and whatnot. And well, I think it's kind of okay if someone like Fritz Leiber does it with his own characters, because he kind of probably knows in his head how the whole thing works. And with Conan, I found it kind of difficult to believe that, because Howard like explicitly said that he doesn't have like a biography of Conan. He doesn't know what happened in which order. It's more like all over the place.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to read the Conan stories in order for them to work either. I mean, except for, I would say, read Hour of the Dragon near the end.
Yeah, definitely.
Other than that, they're pretty interchangeable, right? So.
Yes, and I mean, that's like another thing with these, and we'll see that when we go through them and when we come to like later volumes, we can see those characters aging, and there will be sometimes references forward or backwards, but most of the time they still kind of stand alone. You can read a lot of them in all kinds of orders, but it's, I guess, important to read the Knight and Knave of Swords at the end, because it shows a fairly old Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, and that sense of like, I guess it also works really well with this group, because we have like a friendship, and friendships change over time and friendships grow over time. And sometimes there's phases when people don't talk to each other and then they find each other again and all of that stuff. And so the friendship as like almost like the main character of the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories grows and changes over time, evolves over time. So having that sort of biography, I guess, enforces or reinforces that feeling that the friendship is actually, if not the main character, then at least a very prominent character of these stories in itself.
Yeah, I like that idea. The friendship is actually a character unto itself.
Yeah,
because you don't have that in Conan, because it's a Conan's a one-man wrecking crew. He doesn't need anybody.
Conan does not have friends.
He has alliances and dalliances and all sorts of other things, but he doesn't really have friends. That's true, except Tricero.
Oh yeah, that's true. Tricero is a friend. That's very true. So I guess let's look at these, and let's look at the first two, those being the Snow Women and the Unholy Grail. Let's start with the Snow Women. Like, how did you like that one?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, it's written in the very classic sword and sorcery style. The social dynamics of Fafhrd's, for lack of a better word, hometown are interesting, where you have the setting in the north, of course, where the barbarians are from. It's winter. There is a show about to happen, and then we find out the show is basically a strip show. And the show happens in the Gods Hall, which is the center of religion, because, and I think Leiber says, the gods cannot be shocked. Yeah. And then what the women of the village or town or encampment are very upset about this, as usual. They get upset every year, so they chase the men around, hitting them with snowballs and ice balls with rocks in them, and casting spells. How's that for a summary?
Or I think it's a good
Would that make
start for like the setting. I think so. I remember reading that for the first time and finding it slightly ridiculous, but I was much
Yeah.
younger back then. And I've read it again, I think, because it does some really interesting things there. It obviously plays into like a lot of like gender stereotypes with like the jealous women and the drunken idiots of men that just, want to look at boobs, to put it mildly, and so forth. He does that, but he does something that he does later on with like the friendship and everything as well. Fritz Leiber is a very good observer of human interactions and managed to write them in like with an ironic distance that nevertheless feels loving in a way. He's making fun of them, but in a gentle way. And basically he's making fun of everyone in that situation in a sort of gentle way on the overall thing. Although he does actually touch on some pretty dark themes in that first story already.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, when you find out more about how Fafhrd's father died
Yeah.
and whether or not Fafhrd's mother had a role in that, I mean, that's kind of left almost as an open question. You kind of get some answers to that, but I
Yeah.
mean, and then the whole, like, the atmosphere of the whole place is tense.
Yeah.
And it's tinged with like danger and like dark, cold sorcery the entire time. You know what I mean? So
yeah, the dark sorcery certainly is a big thing. What I really liked, well, liked is maybe the wrong word, but like I really appreciated the way he does sort of unfold that whole thing with Fafhrd's mother and his dead father, and the way Fafhrd's mother, like the dynamic there of like that overweening mother that is very much trying to keep control of everything, and Fafhrd trying to step out of that control. I think that's like that's a fairly observant or fairly nuanced take for what is at its heart still like a sword and sorcery adventure story. I mean, there seems to be a lot of I don't want to say personal experience, but certainly someone has observed that sort of relationship of parents towards their children before, and is able to reproduce it in a fantasy context in a way that say, well, Robert E. Howard probably wasn't able to, because he had a very weird relationship with his mother, to put it mildly.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, if you strip away all the ridiculous elements, like all the fantastic elements, I should say, in the Snow Women story, I mean, it's actually just it's a family story, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at its heart is a conflict between a mother and a son, right? And the son wants to leave and do bigger and better things, and the mother wants to keep him home.
Yeah. What did you think about like the relationship with his wife to be, or maybe wife to be, his lover that is pregnant? Because I mean, that's an interesting aspect as well, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because you always have the noble barbarian in these sword and sorcery things.
Yeah.
Or at least the stereotype, and that's what everybody seems to read into them. And then when you actually read them, the barbarians aren't that noble. I mean, Fafhrd, for lack of a better word, knocks up his old lady, and then it's like, well, I'm not staying around here. I'm out of here. I was kind of surprised. It's like, wow, okay, that's pretty cold, man. But
yeah,
all right.
Although it is fairly interesting what he does there, because he already plays up that idea that of tradition and versus like civilization, and the idea that Fafhrd wants to see the world and thinks about civilization in a lot of ways, whereas his mother and Mara, his lover, there is all about, yeah, but what you want out there in that stinking civilization, we're up here, our good northern barbarians have our much better, much purer life. And he kind of plays up that idea that you have with that whole cliche of the noble savage. It's like, no, not like that.
Are you saying Leiber's using those themes ironically?
Yeah. I would say he's using them ironically to make a serious point.
Yeah. That the whole noble savage trope or theme is a stupid one, a construction.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that he packs a lot of these things into it, because we still at the same time have the people that come from civilization, like Vlana and Velix the Venturer, and they're all about, yeah, but civilization really stinks. It really sucks, man.
I did enjoy that part. Like, no, I want to go to civilization. It sounds great. And they're like, no,
No.
it's terrible. Actually, it sucks.
Yeah, I did appreciate that part very much. And yeah, I think I have grown older and realized, grown able to appreciate a lot of the things going on in this story, and the fact that he just like actually, you know, just leaves his pregnant lover and just goes off with someone else. I'm like, wow, you're not a good guy, my friend.
No, I mean, Fafhrd is not your knight in shining armor at all. He is kind of a dick. And there is also a rocket ski jumping scene, which I have to mention.
Yeah, the rocket ski jump is definitely a really cool idea, and I did appreciate that. Yeah, but overall, I think what Fritz Leiber manages in that story, and what really works, is when he talks about Fafhrd, the characters, like all the weird insecurities of like late puberty, right? We have that situation when at the beginning he's just helping helping Vlana to get away there, and then he still seems to be sort of in love with Mara until she tells him that she's pregnant, and he's like, oh gods, I'll never get out of here now. And then you have like later on this situation when he's like super jealous and angry and just tears down the tent of like the Charon master. And it really captures that weird like unsteadiness of like young adulthood or late, you know, puberty or late adolescence, when you do have these horrible mood swings and do really dumb shit because you get like annoyed by something very, you know, by all kinds of things. And I think he captures that fairly well in a story that is still, you know, supposed to be an action adventure.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I guess I didn't think about it that way, because it's all been a very long time for us, hasn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's parts of the thing that I really liked about it. And I think he does that fairly well in this story, and it feels more authentic. It did touch me more than the Unholy Grail did afterwards. And there's probably a lot of reasons why the Fritz Leiber one, why the Fafhrd story works better than the other one, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the Unholy Grail now? Because I have a theory.
Yeah, let's talk about the Unholy Grail. Let's hear your theory, and then I'll tell you what I know and what I suspect, and then we compare theories while getting drunk, which feels to be a very appropriate Fafhrd and Grey Mouse thing to do.
Yeah, they would probably sit here with us. So anyway, let's go back to Conan, because I just not so long ago read all of the Robert E. Howard Conans, and most of the time the villain is a black sorcerer, right? A black magician.
Yeah.
Ooh. And Thothamon is our, you know, classic billboard black magician, right?
True.
So then fast forward to Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. So how do we set up the dynamic of the friendship, right? Well, Fafhrd is your fair-haired northern barbarian who wants to see civilization. And then Grey Mouser doesn't start out as, but ends up being a black magician. So in Conan terms, they should be enemies. But now in the setup for Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, they're actually the best of friends, which, given sword and sorcery rules, they are polar opposites and should have to fight to death. And that's why Fritz Leiber turns it on its head.
Yeah. I can see that. Like, my theory is a bit more in like looking into the author past. So the idea obviously is that Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser are modeled after Fritz Leiber and his best friend Harry Otto Fischer. And apparently Fischer came up with both of them, with both characters. And apparently Harry Otto Fischer is the Mouser, and Fritz Leiber is Fafhrd, or, you know, they're inspired by, and so forth. And there is a later thing where Henrietta Fisher says that the only story that he really did not really like or enjoy that much was the origin story of the of the Mouser in the Unholy Grail. And he actually wrote a story about the youth and upbringing of the Mouser. It's a very short one that appeared in Dragon magazine, as Liam of Liam's Lyceum told me yesterday when we talked.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a fun story. It's a very short one, just like telling basically the origin story of the Grey Mouser in Lankhmar and whatnot. But yeah, so my theory is that with Fafhrd being more Fritz Leiber's character, he's able to recreate that one's backstory or that one's origin story in a more empathetic way than he is able to do with the Grey Mouser, because he has less of a connection to the Grey Mouser at that point.
Yeah, okay. I mean, to be fair, the Unholy Grail is still, it's a pretty good story. It's not bad at it.
No, it's a pretty good story. I still like it a lot. It just for some reason I felt more of a connection with the Snow Women and Fafhrd in that situation than I did with the Grey Mouser and his story.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe it's also because I think as like love interest, as female love interest, Vlana is a much better or a much more interesting character than Ivrian is, I think. But that's, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and the Vlana love interest story is, there's full of twists and turns and intrigues, and
yeah. Whereas,
I mean, the Ivrian story is not so, I mean, I would say interesting. It does have a nice twist at the end, which I enjoy.
Yeah, the ending there is really good. Like structurally, I think the Unholy Grail is structurally really well done. You have that comeback, you have the revenge story, and then you have the almost kind of ghost story like ending of Unholy Grail, when basically he sends his hate through Ivrian, through that connection to her mother, who apparently the Duke really feared. And that's the thing, like the whole family thing in Ivrian's family with the Duke, who has apparently this weird love-hate relationship with his dead wife for all kinds of fear reasons and whatnot. That stuff is really well done, and in a way, because it's more nuanced than you usually get in a sword and sorcery story about, like, the parents of one of the parents of a love interest are rarely explored in that detail.
No, they're usually only beheaded.
True. So I think that's an interesting thing. I feel he does a little too little with Ivrian, makes it too much the like naive I don't want to say damsel in distress, but yeah, it's too much of that, or too naive, I guess, in a way, and too simple. Although I still see him trying to make a point there of like someone being crushed down so far that all they have is basically fear, and how that fear is ruling them. I can see the point that he's making there, but it just doesn't really click for me in some way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's always interesting, like the sword and sorcery style of magic I've always enjoyed, because it's always linked to like sympathetic emotions, you know, and it's not like a hard magic system or anything like that, but I always enjoy the flavor descriptions, and they're always so emotive when sorcerers are using magic and sword and sorcery. So I think like right near the end of the story, the Unholy Grail, like the last 4 or 5 pages there is actually, it's pretty good, and it really wraps it up nicely.
Yeah.
I wish the rest of the story had been as good as that last scene, I guess. Would be my
opinion. Yeah, I see what you mean. I think also the whole, like, his master Glavis Rowe being this basically hippie mage, it just feels as he's like putting it on a little too thick there. It's like I love the idea of like the white magician hedge wizard who's basically a druid. He feels like a D&D druid to me.
Yeah, totally, an old guy.
But I don't know. It felt a bit too much like a woodcut compared to the Snow Women, which seemed to have more nuance.
Yeah, I agree with you. So should we move on?
Yeah, but something that I find interesting in there is, like, I would really like to know, and I didn't double check, it's like those two are written at different times, and then in 1970 he writes Ilmet and Lankhmar about their meeting. And I'm wondering if he, like, for this like sword collection, did like go in and edit them slightly to have that first meeting of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, so that is both like referenced in the Unholy Grail and in the Snow Women when Fafhrd was pirating and ran across the Grey Mouser who was on his like quest for Glavis Row. And I'm wondering if those bits were like basically fitted in when he edited the whole thing for this collection of stories. And I just don't know because I didn't check. And I guess you can find out if you have like the original like 1957 version of the Snow Women or whenever that one came out, and just look if it's already mentioned there, if it later just like evolved later, because it is very neat when you read it now, because it makes the whole thing feel really coherent when both of them independently remember their like meeting somewhere, and then they like pick it back up when they talk about to each other in Ilmet and Lankhmar later on.
Yeah, I actually did look this up, and according to Wikipedia, which is a trustworthy academic source,
yeah,
Ilmet and Lankhmar was written in 70. Unholy Grail was written in 62, and Snow Women was written in 1970 as well.
So yeah. So basically the question is, did in the Unholy Grail, that scene like when the Mouser remembers running into pirates, was that scene in the original 1962 version, or did it just appear there later? Or did you like put it in there later on to make his point?
Yeah, I don't know. Interesting question though. It is rather convenient though, isn't it?
It is rather convenient, yes. All right, but I think it's time to go to the one that we really need to talk about. That is Ilmet and Lankhmar, which I would say is one of the best sword and sorcery stories I've ever read. It's just extremely good.
Yeah, I mean, this is an absolute banger from start to finish. I love it. It is so much fun. And yeah, I've read it 3 times now in the last week, and I can't stop reading it. So what do you want to do first? There's so much going on in the story, and there's so much going on in the prose that like we could talk about this all day.
Yeah, true. I think we should start looking at the structure, because I think the structure is already what makes it so well done in a way. Like the way he sets it up with that meeting, when we start with a viewpoint on those thieves and not on Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, and then they show both up at that like robbery where they by accident meet each other, and then we switch to them. You could almost take that entire story as a movie script and just like film it that way, and it would work really well. In a way.
That's true of a lot of the old sword and sorcery stuff, though, which boggles the mind.
But like with the way he shifts a perspective, it feels like you have that. You can just see that whole scene of the thieves leaving that like jewel merchant's house and going down the street, and you can see that as basically your like introduction, your teaser, not trailer, but you know what you have, and then you have that combat, and then they walk off together into the night, and that's when you have your credits and title sequence, and then they go and do their thing. It feels very much in that way to me, like structure wise, and then they introduce each other's to each other's girlfriends, and then they do their really drunken stunt at the Thieves Guild, and then they come back, and then they go and do their revenge thing, and then they walk out of town with basically the place burning behind them, which is a perfect 1980s action movie ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
The structure is fairly elegant, because there's a lot happening in that story plot-wise compared to a lot of other sword and sorcery stories, where usually you have like one straightforward plot, and this one is still straightforward, but it has those different acts and everything that you expect from a novel. It's just like condensed really, down to like a really short story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a lot happens in here. I mean, and there's, considering how many pages were spent on drunkenness, which I'm impressed by, obviously, there's still a ton of action. This is wall-to-wall action and drinking. Like, how could you not love this? I don't know.
Yeah, true. One thing that I feel is important to point out with this one is you can tell that Fritz Leiber is actually a trained fencer, because the first combat sequence that he describes with Fafhrd and the Mouser fencing with those bravos of the bodyguards, you can tell that guy actually knows what different fencing movements are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and using like technical terms that you need to look up if you really want to find out what he's doing there.
Well, you don't need to look them up. You can find them out the hard way if you want to learn fencing.
Yeah, true. When I read it yesterday, I did not have the option to go for a quick fencing class, unfortunately.
Oh, well, I can't remember what parry and carte is, but when he talks about like parry second, that's like the low parry.
Yeah.
I think on your right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And then, second would be on your right-hand side, and then number 4 parries on your left. So.
Yeah. But yeah, just like it's interesting when you compare it to the way your average sword and sorcery writer is writing sword fights, which is usually a lot of like highly energetic swinging of weapons in all places.
You did not even mention a single tigerish leap. And that
there is none. There's no tigerish leap, and there's no steel fuse knit to the keen fighting brain. They're not there.
And I'm not even complaining for once that that's not there, which is strange for me. Normally I need that.
Yeah, most things get better with tigerish leaps. It's just like a rule of thumb in general.
Yeah. But I mean, Leiber's prose is excellent all over the place. I mean, you get technical fencing terms, you get really good action sequences.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get some of the dialogue in this is, I mean, I'd say some of the best dialogue I've read in a long, long time, if not some of the best dialogue I've read.
Yeah. And I think that's like an interesting thing is that he does things there with a prose style that is still fairly rooted in your 1930s pulp action style of prose. It's like very much like a descriptive kind of prose from the outside, but it reads more modern than your Clark Ashton Smiths or your Robert E. Howards.
Mm-hmm. But it flows better, but it doesn't lose its poetry, its poetic nature.
Yeah.
You know, which is, I think, something modern fantasy has basically lost to its detriment.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in making things more modern and more accessible, we've lost a lot of what makes individual writers individuals, so that everybody's writing sounds and reads very similarly these days. Not everybody's, but, you know, the majority of the mass consumption fantasy reads like every other mass consumption fantasy, and we celebrate, you know, how accessible it is. Well, we've lost all individuality. Whereas like Leiber's prose stands out from anybody else's I've read. Yeah. You know, even though it's recognizably sword and sorcery, it's very much his own prose, and I enjoy that immensely.
I think a huge part is really that he has this like slightly ironic distance to a lot of things, in a way.
Yes, and I mean he's having fun with the prose in this.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. Yeah. A great example, when the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser go to the bar to get some more booze, because we all need that, and they leave their girlfriends in the apartment.
Yeah.
And they have that conversation, and they're talking about, oh, was that really the sorcerer's familiar, or was it not? And Grey Mouser says, you're creating bugbears, formless baby ones unlicked by logic, my barbarian friend. How the fuck do you come up with that sentence?
Yeah, that's like, really good. Although, like right before that, now we're going to get into that in a moment. But yeah, the language he uses, I think the closest you can come to it is sometimes in Clark Ashton Smith and sometimes in Jack Vance, who both introduce like elements of humor and the slight tongue-in-cheekness of looking at things in a similar way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that you're creating bugbears unlicked by logic is just really like that's great poetry right there.
I mean, yes, it's poetic, it's beautiful, and it's hilarious.
Absolutely.
Remember when fantasy used to be fun? Oh,
Yeah, I remember it.
jeez. It's like a breath of fresh air reading stuff from the 70s and 60s.
True.
Strange.
Yeah, but let's look at some of the other things. The toxic masculinity, the bromance stuff, and the alcoholism. And there's like a wonderful thing there. Right before they go to get their booze, when they're leaving to get their booze, and both their girlfriends are all about like, do you really have to? And Vlana, the older one, is like, you know what? There comes this point at every party where all the men have to step out. It's stupid, but it has to be done.
It's true.
Yeah,
I don't know why. It's true.
that's what I love about it, is like he describes very weird male patterns of behavior, and it's like, I don't know why. It's just there, and it's okay to make fun of it, which I think is, I guess, the great thing about it. He shows these things, and he's like, yeah, you know what? It is stupid.
Yeah, and he does it in a very tongue-in-cheek way. It's not just like, oh, men are stupid. It's like, yeah, we know we're stupid, but I mean, he makes fun of it, and it's like, that's what we do at every party. All the dudes get together when they're drunk enough, and they're like, we're gonna go out on a mission. Nobody knows why this happens. It just does. And then Leiber just pokes fun at it, and then guys like me and you who know this is true just laugh our asses off because he nailed it. Like he nails so much about male behavior, which is just it's incredible.
Yeah, I love the fact when they're both like they're meeting and they're like immediately best buddies, and then that nervousness when they really want the other one to approve like the hotness of their girlfriend in some way,
which is very important when you were a young man for some reason. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and neither one of us know why that is, but this is very important. When you're a young guy and you're like, yeah, my buddy thinks my girlfriend is hot. I did something correct.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's tied into that weird, vulnerable insecurity, which Leiber illustrates so well in young men when they first meet each other and they dearly want to impress each other. But they can't let on that they're trying to impress each other. So everything has to be casual and very nonchalant, but at the same time, they're trying very hard to impress each other. And if you want to let the other guy know that you are impressed, you also like have to let him know, but you can't overdo it. So it's a very weird sort of mating ritual dance of a bromance.
Yeah, and I think he nails that whole dance so well.
It is perfect.
Yeah. I've been there. I've done that.
This is exactly what we did when we met. Oh, yeah. So you're into metal. Yeah. What kind of bands do you like? Which is the deadliest question in the world between two metalheads when they first meet.
Yeah.
Because if you say the wrong thing, that's it. If you had said, oh, yeah, I totally am into black metal and mayhem, we never would have spoken again.
True. Yeah. But yeah, now I'm just like really happy how much of that he actually gets. And then I guess we should talk about the drinking and the alcoholism.
Why? Is it a problem?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that he shows like the idea, and he makes it very clear that it's like there's the situation, and at some point they decide that this night will be all about heavy drinking, and the girlfriends are not really happy with that, and then they go ahead and do it anyway, and then it escalates to all kinds of ways. And once again, he's not beyond just showing the actual consequences of it. It's like, this is kind of dangerous, and it's not exactly what you should do. But once again, it's like, he doesn't judge really, but he does not shy away from showing and sharing the negative sides of their behavior and of what they're doing.
No, and he's great at poking fun of it. I mean, that whole conversation, I think it's Vlana, when she starts telling them, no, you guys are too drunk to go break into the Thieves Guild, which I don't know, that kind of makes sense, I guess. Like, you guys are drunk as shit. Maybe you shouldn't break into the Thieves Guild. And they're like, no, it's fine. We're drunk. Like, have you ever seen the elaborate caution of a drunken man? a drunken man is far more cautious than an ordinary man. That's exactly how you feel when you're drunk. You're like, I'm a way better version of me right now. Like, this is awesome. I can do whatever.
That is very true.
Yeah. And then of course it all goes to shit. Like, of course it does.
Yeah, true. And I think that's part of what makes it so good, especially when you see them actually going for their like whole walk into the Thieves Guild just to impress their girls, which is, let us not forget that they get very drunk and then decide to do that whole thing to impress their girlfriends.
Yeah. This is very much a young man's story.
Yeah, very much. And then they pull off the thing, and by the luck of the really dumb and drunk, they kind of get away with it, really.
Yeah, well, there must be at that magical drunken level where you actually, stuff just works for whatever reason.
I've been in that place, and I have known people pull off similar things. I mean, not the Thieves Guild, but I remember a friend of ours who did very much try to enter the backstage area at Wacken Open Air and try to climb over a fence, and he's cut his hand, and he just held it shut and walked with a bleeding hand past security guards into the backstage area.
See? Empirical proof. The elaborate caution of the drunkard.
Yeah, I'm not saying that was like a good idea, but it kind of worked.
Yeah.
And yeah, but then I think we need to talk about the Thieves Guild, because they go into the Thieves Guild, and I don't have proof that this is, I mean, I need to look up when the story Thieves' House was actually written, which is, I think, before that. But I've said that before, like Fritz Leiber's big contribution to fantasy literature and tabletop role-playing games is the invention of the Thieves Guild as an organization with all the things that Thieves Guilds do nowadays in fantasy stories and fantasy games, where we always have Thieves Guilds.
That's true. I mean, it's a bold claim, but I think you might be right. Because the Thieves Guild is organized. They have training rooms, they have barracks, they have guards, they have different guild masters. It's run like a corporation almost.
It's run like a corporation, and it is connected to the Beggars Guild, which is always something that you have often. And yeah, I think it's like he came up with that idea, poking fun at it, of course, because the way he describes that whole Thieves Guild feels very much like him not taking it too seriously in a way. And then people who played role-playing games ran with it. It was like, yeah, this is awesome. I can play a thief, which is cool. And I can organize it and bring it in there. And then it kind of made its way from there back into fantasy fiction. Definitely through Terry Pratchett, who has a Thieves Guild that is very much a commentary or like paying homage to Fritz Leiber and Lankhmar, because obviously Ankh-Morpork is very much, Discworld's version of Lankhmar.
Yeah, because even in the Conan stories, I mean, Tower of the Elephant, there's not really much of a Thieves Guild. Like, there might be one, but Conan's not part of it. And then I think there's some mention of Thieves Guilds in like Shadizar, but then Conan either is not part of it or he killed somebody and he got kicked out, something like that.
Yeah.
There's no in-depth description of like, how they operate and like down to the fine details that Leiber gives us this one.
I mean, there's like places that are called like a city of thieves, but I've rarely seen like the idea of like, this is like the Thieves Guild. They're basically like a corporation. And you need to be a licensed member of the Thieves Guild if you want to thieve somewhere.
This is true. And they also operate as sort of like a gray eminence too. I mean, it's sort of insinuated they're the power behind the overlord.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting, if this is where it originates, then I think you're right. Then this is a pretty cool concept.
Yeah. No, I feel that whole like Thieves Guild sequence is really well done, because you have those training rooms, all of the fun things in there, which is where we get the thing that Fritz Leiber does as well. that is very sword and sorcery. The exotic elements of like the exotic treasures and stuff. And he just like goes through this again. Then I have like this stuff and the dagger made out of diamonds and the mask, the golden mask with all the rubies on it. And like, wow, this is cool. I want to go and loot that place right now.
Well, that's the thing about sword and sorcery. You need swords, you need sorcery, but you also need really good loot.
Yes,
this is important.
Very much so. What do you think about the whole like sorcery aspect though of Christomelo and his rat thing?
Yeah, it's almost a classic sword and sorcery, but I mean, I thought the introduction of like the alchemy is interesting. Like he's channeling a spell through an alembic.
Yeah.
On a table that's filled with all sorts of boiling, mysterious liquids, and and then he's reading from a scroll, and everybody in the Thieves Guild is sort of like, they walk by the room and they look in and they run in terror because it's terrible magic. And it's interesting because like in the end, his weapon that he uses to kill is the actual night smog of Lankhmar.
Yeah.
The stuff that's always hanging around. So he just kind of harnesses that. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, I mean, the idea of using the night smog as a weapon is really cool.
Yeah, and it's a lot more, I don't know, growing up playing D&D, you get tired of wizards throwing fireballs. So, I mean,
yeah.
It's a nice change from that.
It certainly is, and he does that really well. I think one thing that he does that I think is really clever is that you, the reader, know from the beginning what's going on, because you know that you have that animal companion. It's fairly easy because you have the names of the thieves, so you know when they call after Slitherkin, you know that it is definitely the familiar. And when you have that scene in, like, he sets it up in a way that you as the reader know what is going horribly wrong at this point, while those two idiots are still, drunkenly congratulating each other on what they have done. And you already know what is going to be the dark reveal afterwards, right? And I think a lot of tension in the story comes from the reader knowing and the characters not knowing yet.
Yeah, I know. I kind of wanted to yell at them like, you idiots. Wake up. Don't you know what's going to happen?
I mean, they're drunk. They're just drinking perfume because they run out of booze.
Yeah, well.
Which is an absolutely fantastic scene when Fafhrd decides to drink the perfume because he needs to drink something and that's the only thing he has to hand.
Yeah, that's true.
That was pretty fucking insane. I love that.
Yeah. But it's that point, at the wee hours of the night where you need one more drink to finish what you're doing. You don't always make good choices.
Oh no. I've been there. It's usually that beer that you open, take one swallow, and then you leave it somewhere. And the next morning of the party is spent finding all those half-empty beers before someone kicks them over. But I mean, that's how it works. They're doing something stupid, and while they're away doing that stupid thing, their girlfriends get murdered, and then they go back just all cold hatred and just, kill the sorcerer. And that one poor thief who has nothing to do with it and is a kid.
The 10-year-old boy?
The 10-year-old boy that just gets killed by Fafhrd because he's in the way.
What's interesting about that is, I mean, it's horrific that Fafhrd kills a 10-year-old boy. Let's be honest. But slightly before that scene, Fafhrd and Grey Mouser are arguing about whether killing somebody in combat is murder.
Yes.
And Mouser says, no, it's always murder. Killing people is murder. Doesn't matter if it's in combat or not.
Yeah.
It's murder is murder. You're killing someone. Don't be an idiot. And then Fafhrd goes and does that. So, I mean, I read that as like Leiber's sort of commentary or critique on, the whole, I don't know, I would say fantasy genre where it's, I killed him in honorable combat. So it's, or I was in a rage. I mean, That's your classic barbarian excuse, right? I was in a rage. I just saw red. And I woke up and it wasn't my fault. And it's like, I think Leiber sets up like very explicitly, like killing is murder. Therefore, Fafhrd kills a child. Fafhrd is a child murderer.
Yeah.
And Fafhrd, to be fair, feels horribly about it.
That's true.
Yeah. Which makes him much more interesting than our favorite child murderer, Karsa Orlog.
Yeah, he doesn't ever care about that, I think.
No. Which is why Karsa drives me nuts.
I mean, his attitude changed in the books that you haven't read yet. I'll say that.
I know. I know that, but I mean, I would rather read Fafhrd stories than Karsa stories at this point. Just saying that, because at least there's some emotional depth there.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, it is interesting that like that's set up very explicitly. Like Fafhrd is a child killer. He's a horrible person, and he feels horrible about it. But this is the kind of shit that happens when you invade the Thieves Guild when you're shit-faced drunk.
Yeah. I think that's in general something that I feel Fritz Leiber does very well with Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, is that it's very clear that those people are not generally nice people. They're normal people in a lot of ways, and they try to be sort of okay people and, you know, not be like absolute arseholes, but they fail from time to time. They fail badly from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, they're screw-ups. They're as screwed up as, you know, me or you. I mean, hopefully not as bad as me and you, but
yeah. Let's hope they're not as bad.
But it's a lot more compelling a story than, you know, the sort of like, oh, the white knight born of noble blood does nothing wrong, blah blah blah. You know, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse are screw-ups. They're drunks. They're idiots. And like they only succeed by luck occasionally. Yeah. You know, even when things go wrong, sometimes they just get lucky.
Yeah, true.
It's
I mean, that's like an interesting thing. They have like a lot of nuance that I really appreciated. Like with Fafhrd, who's interested in the stage and thinks about becoming an actor. And that's an interesting thing because Fritz Leiber was an actor for a while, and his father was an actual actor, and Fritz Leiber played a bunch of parts on the stage, and
that's cool.
In some black and white movies, I think, like silent movies as well. So those connections, those like weird nuances when you're like, why is Fafhrd interested in in this? And it's like, all right, because Fritz Leiber was interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's probably not something you caught as a 15-year-old, or I certainly didn't.
No,
but, I mean,
no, of course not.
Yeah, you're like, oh, whatever, get to the thief killing. But I mean, it's really interesting now reading it when you're older, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of things going on in this. And like, you know, it's interesting because like Leiber uses them being like shit-faced drunk as an excuse to sort of like make them like randomly muse about things like you do when you're shit-faced drunk and you have weird associations in your brain.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, we're breaking into the Thieves Guild and we're probably going to die. It's like, man, I could have been a really good actor. Yeah. You know, that would have been a lot of fun. But these are the conversations we've had at 3 a.m.
Yeah. I love that scene when they're like facing the head of the Thieves Guild and then are trying to free themselves, and you have the Mousers plan to free Fafhrd's leg and pretending like he's in barbarian rage. So I'm trying to stop him. And him just hoping that Fafhrd understands what he's doing when he's like swinging his sword wide. It's like, apparently he understands, but he could just as well be just like drunk and not hit anyone in that situation. And it's never clear. Is he pretending to be in barbarian rage? Is he in barbarian rage? We don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of serendipity in that story.
Yeah, and I mean, it does make it a lot of fun to read because I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. It's not obvious.
No.
You know? Yeah, it is fun.
Yeah, but I think like, I mean, the good part, or like the big part, is that the payoff at the ending when they go in for like their revenge attack, it feels really satisfying in that situation. Like the way they just basically become like these stone cold killers, and it's bad what they're doing. Well, I mean, they're killing the magician and the familiar, which is, I guess, well, it's still murder, but it's kind of, for the reader, it feels satisfying in a way.
Yeah. Well, when Grey Mouser skewers the familiar and the huge leader rat with one thrust of scalpel, I am like, yes, perfect. That was an excellent. That's a natural 20, baby.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea that it is Vlana's silver dagger that actually goes through the sorcery, whereas all their own like knives and weapons don't work, has this like dimension of like, is it because it's Vlana's dagger? Is it because of silver? We don't know, but it adds that like mystical dimension to it in a way.
Yeah, and it's also a nice like way to tie the story up, right? You know. Yeah, I was very happy about that bastard sorcerer dying.
Well, he was only doing his job.
Yeah, but he was an asshole. I don't like him. I get very personally involved in sword and sorcery books. Yeah, especially when the main characters are drunken idiots. I don't know, call it sympathy.
Yeah. I can see that, certainly. So yeah, the story in itself, we've gone through all of it. I think it's really a masterpiece of sword and sorcery. That one, even if you don't read any other Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, you should definitely go and read Ilmet and Lankhmar, because it is absolutely, it's perfection in sword and sorcery terms.
Yeah, I mean, not just sword and sorcery terms. If you're going to say you've read fantasy and you haven't read that, I mean, you've really missed out, you know?
Yeah.
It's like if you say you like metal and you haven't listened to Judas Priest Painkiller.
Yeah. You don't even have to like it, but you need to read it once. You have to, you know, to know what it is about. But yeah, let's look at some of the other aspects, like the prose. You already mentioned that he's like slightly ironic, while still very poetic. Prose is like a unique aspect of the story that of Fritz Leiber's writing in general, but it comes across in this one really, really well and really fresh.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many lines like in this story that are just hilarious, you know. And I mean, I don't know how many times I laughed out loud reading Ilmet and Lankhmar. It's just, it's perfect. It's poetic and funny at the same time, which is, I think, probably very, very difficult to do. I certainly can't do it. I mean, it's not saying much, but.
I love this, like, also like the attention to detail in this story, I think, is insane. We have that one thing when they're stepping out to go to to the Thieves Guild, and they're like not using the stairs going down, but actually using the rope to like go down, and the women are like, are they still standing outside? And you can tell they only do it to fuck with them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, also the descriptions in this, I mean, if we're still talking about prose, they're amazing. I mean, like, I know like a lot of people give sword and sorcery shit for being, oh, it's too many adjectives, it's too many adjective heavy sentences. I mean, I personally like it, but I mean, like, when Leiber describes the perfume that Fafhrd is drinking, that gardenia like reek of it, and like you can actually almost smell it, like it's, and the smell of like the shit in the alley they cover themselves with to disguise themselves as beggars, like it's awesome, like it's incredible. Again, old school sword and sorcery, good descriptions.
Yeah. I enjoy it. No, I think that the way, like, Orger Boulevard, like, how'd you come up with that stuff?
Yeah, well, it was what, 60s and 70s, right? So
yeah, true. Very true. And I think like even the small bits and pieces, when you have the scene when they disguise themselves as beggars, and everyone is like, yeah, they're disguised. We know you're not blind and lame. You can stop trying so hard. But it still works as a disguise because all the beggars are basically pretending to be handicapped in some way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's that moment in your D&D campaign where your players failed the disguise roll. And you're like, ah, whatever.
And the scene with the courtesan that is like all fawning over Mouser while her lover and is like getting angry next to her, and that was just like,
yeah. And they get a gold coin.
They get a gold coin. I know, and they're like, yeah, well, we should maybe do this. It seems to be profitable.
A gold coin in sympathy of a beautiful woman. Why not take up beggary?
Yeah, and Fafhrd being annoyed because they think he's old because they put like some wrinkles on his skin for that one. He gets pissed off that Mouser gets like the sympathy, and he's just like, No, I love that bit so much. That was just so good.
Yeah. Oh, okay. What do we got left to talk about, Raph? I know I had some things, but I can't remember them now. So.
I don't know. Did you want to talk more about the whole like how they're I think that's like the interesting thing especially when you read first the two other stories, the Snow Women and the Unholy Grail, and then you see Vlana and Ivrian just for such a short time before they just get killed off, and I'm like, it's almost a shame that we don't see more of them, because Vlana seems to be like, for example, a character that does have like their own agenda and move and all kinds of things that she could do, and then she's just like standing there and getting Ivrian drunk before they both die, and I'm like, okay, that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I mean, because Vlana's a really cool character, and I think Ivrian could have been a cool character if she'd not been killed by night smog and eaten by rats so early. But yeah, I mean, it's also like, because a lot of the sword and sorcery stories, let's be honest, when the love interest gets killed off, it's a convenient excuse to send the hero into a berserker rage, and you don't really care. Whereas this one, I'm like, oh, look, that sucks.
Yeah.
So I was so happy when they killed that bastard sorcerer. Fuck that guy.
I think the important thing there is, and why it works here, is that yes, the love interest gets killed off, but the love interest gets killed off because of what the dudes are doing. It's not just like the random, someone comes along and murders, the usual, they killed my dog, now it's personal kind of thing. But it's literally, if Fafhrd and Grey Mouse would not have stolen from the Thieves Guild, the whole thing would not have happened. If they hadn't been drunk idiots trying to climb in to impress their girlfriends by entering Thieves Guild, they might have been able to do something about the magic and stuff back there. It's very much always their fault. It's not the girl's fault or just like random things. It's literally Fafhrd and Grey Mouse fuck up, and that's why they're in that situation. Yeah, I think that's why it works.
Yeah, I mean, I felt really bad for them when they come back and they find their girl's dead, and then they realize like, how it went down.
Yeah.
It's a pretty dark moment in the story.
It is a dark moment. I think it's like the idea of, guilt being like what drives the hero into berserker rage or whatever is one thing, but with this one, you can feel, their guilt is justified. They're to blame. They fucked it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing about Leiber. I mean, like, I don't know, somebody recently made a video about Grimdark and how people that read Grimdark think that only Grimdark has consequences.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Leiber doesn't pull any punches in this one. I mean, like,
no.
it's rough. You know, that Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse screw up badly all the time, and like in this instance, like their mistake gets their girlfriends killed. Like it's horrible, and they fully realize that they are culpable, for this.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's pretty dark, man.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes it so good, is that you see that what Leiber really gets in this one is you get all the euphoria and the ridiculousness of both of them being drunk and having that huge high of actually pulling off their stupid drunken stunt and then being slapped in the face. And that's, I think, another one of those things that, like, even if it's not been, Thieves Guild and our girlfriends being killed, but definitely one of those situations where you wake up the next morning with a terrible hangover and the realization how badly you fucked up with all the things that felt so good last night. And I think that's what works so well. The contrast is very real because you have that almost euphoria of them doing their stuff when they're drunk, and then the rude awakening, to put it mildly.
Yeah,
I think that's what makes it work so well.
That's true. I mean, there's real stakes in this story.
Yeah.
Like I really got personally involved. Like I bought into it right away.
Oh yeah, one thing that I think is important to look at, the Silver Eel is the most D&D tavern that I've seen in a long while.
And when they're getting their jugs refilled in there, there's another great line, because they order a drink while the boy goes to the cellar to get more jugs.
Yeah.
And they're having a drink and they're talking. And then I think it's Mouser says to the innkeeper, "Hey, where's our jugs? Did that boy die of starvation on his cellar quest?"
Yeah.
Yeah, but that conversation is actually very interesting because Fafhrd fills Mouser in on the rest of the so-called origin story, how he and Vlana got together, and how he made a very stupid promise to help her destroy the Thieves Guild, which now he realizes that he's in Lankhmar is basically a suicide mission.
Yeah.
I think there's a lesson in there.
Yeah.
For young men. Don't make promises when your dick is hard.
Yeah.
Take it from me. Save yourself some scars.
I think, and what is really interesting is that they having that conversation there about it. They're making all these wise plans on how to, make the thing work and prevent, the suicide mission, basically. And then they go back, and at the first situation that is possible, because of the, you want to be, show off in front of your girlfriend, the Mouser goes and swears that he's going to do it. And that drags Fafhrd in again. And like,
yeah, but that's what best friends do, Raf. We get each other in trouble.
Oh, I know.
That's why I'm on YouTube. This is not a plan.
Yeah, no, I think that, and once again, like a lot of, like, even though it is like at the end of the day like an adventure story and sword and sorcery story, all of the actions feel extremely real and understandable and relatable in a lot of ways. That those characters are very relatable, which, as much as I love Conan's stories, Conan is not a relatable character.
No, like he's almost superhuman, or actually he is superhuman in a lot of ways, where it's like,
yeah,
I don't know if I'd want to have a drink with Conan. I'd probably be terrified.
Yeah.
But like Fafhrd and the Grey Mountain, I could sit down and have beers with these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like what makes the story work so well, is that he kind of, like, Leiber kind of pulls down the sword and sorcery story to a human level while still keeping it sword and sorcery and fantastic in a lot of ways, but the humans feel human in a way.
Yeah, and fallible, intensely flawed and fallible.
Intensely fallible.
Which is very enjoyable. So wait, Raf, I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying this is a very realistic story?
I would say it has verisimilitude is what it has. It's not necessarily realistic, but it is relatable, and it feels authentic.
No, you didn't have to say that word. That's a low blow. Authentic.
Authentic, yeah. But yeah, I think relatability is what Leiber does so well. Because it's like I've never been in Lankhmar. I've never been in a thieves guild. I can certainly hang out with Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, and I can see myself and things that I have done in a lot of the things they do. And I'm like, yeah, that was stupid. And I know it was stupid what you're doing there because I've done the same thing or like something very similar. It was stupid back then. It's stupid for you. Trust me. And I think that's the other thing that you see with Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse. It feels like Fritz Leiber has been there as well. He knows what he's writing about in that situation. These are hard-won lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, yeah, Fritz Leiber's had too many drinks occasionally and gotten himself into some trouble.
Only, to be fair, he actually was very much an alcoholic for a long time in the 60s and 70s. After his wife, his wife passed from like fairly young from cancer, I think, and that kind of dragged him down into alcoholism for like almost like 20 years.
Oh,
there's a dark side to it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but it may still explain why he is so good at describing drunkenness. It's because he's been there and he's done it.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to scratch the surface too hard on the story to find there is a very dark underbelly to it.
Yeah,
which
that might be the other side of what makes it so good. Is like you can feel, while the tone is fairly lighthearted in a lot of ways, through most of the story, all the way until the end when it just like becomes really cold and dark. But you can always feel that there is that darkness underneath it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how he does it, though. I mean, because on the surface, this is a very jaunty buddy cop sort of adventure story until it's very much not.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a 180-degree turn. I mean, the darkness is there the whole time, and as the reader, you know it. But Fafhrd and Mouser don't, and it's very interesting, like that dynamic.
I think it's also interesting the way he does it, because there's still only two people dying in that situation, and that's that 10-year-old boy and the sorcerer. They're not going into like what you might see, your Joe Abercrombies or whatever doing today. They're not going on like a full-on rampage, killing hundreds or whatever when they're racing through that building. They're still only going and kill one person and go out again. But it still feels extremely brutal.
Yeah.
It feels like it would not get better if they killed more people in
there. I'm struggling to imagine a situation that would get better if you killed more people.
I mean, as a story, it would not get more intense if they killed more people.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yeah. Yeah.
My friend, have you been playing in my Pathfinder campaign? What is the order of the day, boys? Mass murder, apparently. I wanted to stop. Anyway, change the subject, please.
Yeah. No, I've yeah, but as I said, like it would not feel more intense or more dramatic if they would kill more people. And
no,
I think that's one of the strengths there, is like the drop in, like, in contrast of like the high adventure stuff into like the cold, brutal, realist ending. I don't want to say realist, but you know what I mean? Like cold, brutal ending, that rude awakening, and pulling it off without making it like an entire bloodbath.
Yeah. Well, this is something that has not, I mean, the idea of scale is a problem with modern fantasy. You've talked about this, I don't know how many times. You don't need to kill 100,000 Trollocs or orcs or whatever to have an impact, which is something again, because I'm an old white man, I'm going to say old fantasy did it better. But no, like the ending of this is just as is incredibly brutal. And only 2 people die, really. Unless you count that damn rat and that damn familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Do we have more about those 3 stories? I mean, it sort of sets up what comes afterwards, because we leave them when they leave Lankhmar to go somewhere else to start over again, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I think, yeah, talked about everything I want to talk about.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. I guess we'll talk again about this when we talk about Swords Against Death. And that one's really cool. And has some fantastic stories and really stupid things that two best friends do when they are either drunk or on the way there, I think.
I wonder why we like these stories, eh?
I have no idea. I think you're creating a bugbear there, unlicked by logic.
No, I think this bugbear has been licked, actually. It is a licked bugbear.
It's a licked bugbear.
I feel like somebody could write a PhD thesis on that sentence. Probably some analytic philosopher somewhere.
I'm sure we'll find one.